Hello YouTubers and RC fans, my name is Ryan Robinson, and today I'm going to be sharing with y'all a follow-up review of my team associated RC10B4.2 race spec two-wheel drive buggy. It's a mouthful. But the reason for doing this review is because there were some mistakes that I made in the last one, so this review is going to correct those mistakes, and it's also going to show y'all the changes that I've made to the car since you last saw it. So let's get the body off and get started. So let's start with the obvious changes first. First of all, tires. Up in the front, I am running my trusty aka rebars with I think they're blue closed cell foam inserts in here, because these aka rebars don't come with foam inserts. And in the rear, I am running Proline hull shots, I believe M3 soft compound with the included open cell foams in them. The Traxxas 2056 waterproof steering servo is gone, and in its place is a Savox SC 1251 Metal Gear high-speed servo. Okay, now it's time to clarify some of the errors I made in my first review. First of all, I said that the main difference between this buggy and the B4.2 is this water-resistant receiver box. What I meant to say is one of the main differences between this buggy and the RC10B4.1 is this waterproof receiver box. The B4.1 RTR did not come with a water-resistant receiver box. The B4.2 race spec RTR does come with one. Also, I got the name of the stock ESC wrong, which I have switched back to for reasons that I will say later. But the name of the ESC, no, you can't see it because I removed some of the paper so the double-sided tape would stick to this thing, is a XPSC 500. In my original review of this vehicle, I said that the ESC was a XPSL 500, and also I messed up in the what the stock brushless ESC on the B4.1 is. The stock ESC on the B4.1, I believe, is a XPSC 450, and I said that ESC's name on the B4.1 was a XPSL 450. The two main reasons why I switched back to the stock ESC is because the Helion ESC had a drag brake setting on it that was always turned on, so every single time I would let off the throttle in the air, my entire car would pitch forward, which would result in a lot of front end landings, a lot of landings like this. However, whenever that would happen, all of the force would just go straight through the chassis and into my servo, which is actually how I broke my Traxxas 2056 servo. And with this ESC, it does have drag brake on it, but you can turn it off completely. Second reason why I switched back to this ESC is because of throttle punch. Throttle punch basically limits the amount of wheel spin you have, so on low traction surfaces, you don't want a lot of wheel spin, and on high traction surfaces, you can turn the throttle punch up all the way because there's increased traction, so you shouldn't have to worry about your wheels constantly spinning and causing your car to spin out. The motor is still the same motor that you saw in my first review of this buggy. It is the brushless, sensorless motor from the Helion Raiden system. I don't think it's called Richter, I believe it's called Raiden. Switched back to the stock RTR transmitter, It is the XP2G. Pretty basic, feels really good in the hand. One thing I like about this radio is the steering wheel. It's very easy to turn, and it's very easy to make accurate and precise steering changes. Features it has some switches for your throttle and steering reversing, some throttle knobs for nitro vehicles, your throttle trim, steering trim, door rate trim, bind button, on and off switch, and it uses 6 AA batteries, not 4. In my first review of this vehicle, I said this thing used 4 AA batteries. No, it actually uses 6. My bad, sorry about that. I made some other changes to the car, but I'm gonna go ahead and stop right here and show you guys some driving footage with the changes that I have shown you thus far. So here's the B4.2 running all of the changes that I have, or running all the changes that you have seen me list on the indoor clay track at Mike's Hobby Shop in Carrollton, Texas. The first thing that I immediately noticed out here was the steering. With that high-speed Metal Gear servo, this car has all of the steering you could ever ask for from a buggy, period. It turns great, it turns very fast, and it's really great. That was the biggest handling improvement that I saw. Like, if you could just change anything on this car, I would highly recommend changing out just tires and servo. You change out those two things, you are off to a great start with this vehicle. However, there were 2 problems with this setup. The first problem came up right at that big turn. Whenever I would take the turn, I didn't catch it on video, but a week later whenever I came up to race this buggy, every time I would take that turn, I would let off the throttle to slow down. Well, the rear end would constantly swing out, and it would cause the car to spin out, and I had a really hard time catching it. And also with this setup, the acceleration of this car is pretty substantial. So it made landing these jumps hard with this setup because it had so much initial acceleration. I had a hard time landing the jumps because the car had a tendency to overshoot them. Now, before I show you the changes that I made to fix this car, I just wanted to show you just some footage of how this car will handle if you keep the exact same setup you just saw, only you go back to the stock front tires and you put on some Proline 2.2-inch dirt hog tires. This is what the vehicle's running out of my front yard. My mom's helping me film this. But out here, the tires, they had a really hard time hooking up just because the surface was very dusty. They just had a really hard time hooking up. But I'm sure that if you have like a hard packed kind of dirt surface that doesn't have a whole lot of dust on it, then these tires should hook up quite well for you. So on to how I fixed the handling quirks of this car in that big huge sweeper turn. After each race, I went out and talked to some of the other racers and who owned B4 buggies just to see how they would set theirs up. What they suggested was to run 27.5 weight shock oil in the rear shocks, and also to run a green spring. I don't have the green spring, but I was able to put in some 27.5 weight shock oil in here. And also, before I made this change, I switched out my wing for this J Concepts 6.5 inch high downforce wing. And something else, I actually tried to fix some handling quirks, because I tried moving the shocks out one hole, but they said no, not a good idea. It's best to move them to the innermost hole and just change out the shock oil and springs. So I changed out the shock oil, not the springs, because they didn't have any green springs that fit this shock body. Now the other changes to this car are all in here in the transmission. This car comes, like I said in my, I believe I stated this in my first review of this buggy, but if I didn't, I'm going to state it now. This car comes with a sealed gear differential. So I opened up the transmission, took out the gear diff and put in some 3,000 weight silicone oil from Losi. That's what the guys at Mike's Hobby Shop recommended. But however, if you do this and you open up your gear, you will find that it is filled with this black grease stuff. So before you put in any silicone oil, you need to clean out as much of that as possible, which is basically you're going to have to take apart almost the entire diff. So it's just a blah process. But if you do that, if you take the time and effort to do that, this car will reward you by handling great. Something else I changed was the spur gear and the pinion gear. This car comes with an 81 tooth spur gear. Well, I changed that to a 78 tooth spur gear. And for the pinion gear, I was running a 21 tooth Robinson Racing pinion gear. Well, I switched that out to a 25 tooth pinion gear. The net result was a lot more top speed, a lot less acceleration, and just overall a very capable buggy. One thing I can't really, this footage really doesn't capture is just how this thing feels. That high downforce wing actually does its job, because if you'll notice that like at slow speeds it's kind of a little squirrely, but once the speed picks up, it just feels more planted and it just becomes a lot more stable at speed. As you can see in this footage, the buggy is really unstable at slow speeds, but then once it picks up speed, the rear end really just plants and becomes a lot easier to drive. I also ran this buggy with this exact same setup minus the 3,000 weight diff fluid at Mike's Hobby Shop in Carrollton, Texas, but unfortunately I didn't really get any footage of that, so this isn't exactly an apples to apples comparison. So because of that, since I was not able to get an apples to apples comparison between this driving footage and the footage you saw before these changes, I get to show you some footage of me crashing my RC10B4.2. Through all that, nothing broke in the footage you just saw. However, a week later, whenever I came back up to Mike's Hobby Shop to race, before the race even started, while I was practicing, I broke one of the camber link ball cups on the front of the buggy, but thankfully that was a really cheap fix. Summing things up, the RC10B4.2 is a great buggy, and I highly recommend it to anyone looking to buy this vehicle. I want to say a special thank you to all the people who helped me make this review possible. That would be David Spates, my mom, and the people in the RC community in Tyler. So that's it for this review. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comment section, and I will do my best to answer them. So that's it for this review. See you next time.